I will leave the trace of the lion's paw on the tablets of history. This is what Benito Mussolini said about himself. A pompous and theatrical expression, it fully reflects the nature of the restless dictator of Italy. In the 30s of the 20th century, he declared his historical mission to restore the Roman Empire. Or rather, to create a new Roman Empire. Let's try to briefly consider the reasons that led to the fiasco of fascist number 1. Low moral and psychological state of the Italians. Here is the opinion of Russian peasants about the Italian soldiers from the Italian Corps. Not bad guys in principle, little capable of cruelty, womanizers and drunkards. At the front, many Italians, with the exception of elite divisions and detachments of black shirts, often unanimously surrendered at a convenient opportunity. Not wanting to die for fools raving about greatness, the people of Italy howled at the moon from the actions of the fascist party officials and the black shirts, trying to cobble together a submissive herd from the Italians. The Italians, who had never lived richly, were happy with a bowl of spaghetti on the table by 1942. The level of development of the Italian economy in the pre-war period did not allow it to hope for victory in a long war. It was lower than that of all the main countries of the opposing blocs, the Allies and the Axis countries. The Italian military industry was inferior to the industry of all countries in the anti-Hitler coalition, both in the quality of the weapons produced and in quantity and technical characteristics. The army was armed with mostly obsolete weapons, and the supply of the troops was extremely disgraceful. The most common tank in Italy, the M1340, which the Italians considered average, by 1942 could not withstand any modern tank of the Allies. Its armor in the front part of the turret was penetrated by any anti-tank gun of the Allies. The most modern fighter, Mach-E Folgore, was extremely small in number, and in terms of characteristics, by the 43rd year, lagged behind all enemy fighters. The artillery almost entirely consisted of models developed during the First World War, was outdated, and the number of guns on the battlefield compared to the British and Americans was very small. If in Ethiopia, Spain, Albania, the weapons and equipment of the Italians allowed them to dominate in battles, then in a clash with the British, Americans and Russians, the army of the Duce showed its complete failure. The only exception was the Navy, with a large number of the latest battleships, cruisers and destroyers. Mussolini's favorite brainchild, but the passive and uninitiative, for the most part, Italian admirals made the Navy almost useless. But the Duce, sincerely confident in his chosenness and infallibility, took on new military adventures, for which Italy simply did not have the resources, and Mussolini kept trying to frighten the world with his power. Each subsequent war of Italy was even more unsuccessful than the previous ones. Only the capture of Ethiopia and the annexation of Albania could be called successful. Mussolini's unfounded confidence in his own genius and historical destiny did not add to the chances of realizing imperial ambitions. It is not for nothing that members of the fascist party, at convenient opportunities, shouted the slogan, "The Duce is always right." But in general he looked much less sinister and gloomy figure against the background of his ally Hitler, and the regime he created was much less cannibalistic. Ancient Rome was often head and shoulders above its neighbors in development, cruel, bloody, but bringing progress to the barbarians, neighbors. Italy in this regard had nothing to offer its neighbors. Rome's expansion was relatively systematic and stretched out over centuries, but Mussolini, an eccentric, confident in his talents, fond of striking theatrical poses, wanted to repeat the centuries-long stage of Rome's conquests, fitting it into just 2 decades. The recent idol of millions of Italians died an absurd and shameful death. He and his mistress, Clara Petacci, were shot and hung by their feet in a Milan square by the Italians themselves, the resistance fighters.